G'day friends, welcome to this concept stamping tutorial. Today we're going to be using concept stamp set 3. I'm going to be using the 4x6 and the 6x8 version. Obviously with all of these tutorials, please feel free to use whatever you have. You don't even have to have these stamps. They can be any stamps that work, or even just your drawings or illustrations or collage, things you find in a magazine, like whatever is going to work for you. Please substitute it if you don't have these. You don't need to have these to have a great time, but I am going to be using them in the demonstration today. So we're going to use concepts 3. I want to use both sizes because I like to play with the proportions, and we're going to stamp out these really simple and curious little baby blossoms. This was actually based off of a little live stream that I did where I looked at Ferdinand Horvath's concept sketches for Ballet de Fleurs, which is an old abandoned Disney short, and I've looked at this before, but during that live stream I wanted to challenge myself to go through the book, take inspiration, and see if I couldn't recreate things with the concept stamp set, because essentially they're all just little shapes and motifs, and they're actually designed to encourage you to build concepts and ideas with them. Instead of sitting down and saying, oh, you know, draw something interesting, you'd be able to sit down with your stamp set, your ink, and just stamp it all out. Kind of puzzle play like little Lego pieces until you get something that you possibly may never have thought up. So this one's actually not even a face today, that we're going to put a cute little face on it, but the pieces we're going to be using I've taken off this little sheet here. So we've got the top of this teapot, we've got this flattened out flower, a teardrop shape, this little curled leaf or little feathery looking thing, this long leaf, and this 3-looped petal. So I've got that in the 4x6 size and the 6x8 size. I have them all positioned onto a block because before I like to do anything, I like to play around with all of my options, and I would encourage you to do the same. If you want to just screenshot or pause on the next few seconds of the video, these are the few that I stamped out initially, and then I went and stamped out a bunch more using some of these extra little pieces. Now you don't have to copy these exactly, and you can see some of these aren't finished because I didn't really like them as I was going along. All the idea was kind of, you know, what if I stacked one smaller flower on top of the bigger flower? What does that look like? I'm just trying to look at the ideas there, and then I will take the ones that I like and actually finish them. So here's a little book I prepared earlier. Here are a few that I stamped out. You can see the shapes under there. Some of them are more finished than others, so like this one is a little harder to see the shapes under. This one here, if you can see the little red, that's the actual stamping ink. I generally suggest that you use something that would almost disappear once you're finished working over the top of it. So it's like you've got your blueprint down there for your piece, but you're not going to see it at the end. But for demo purposes, I like to use Victorian Velvet, this distress ink, because it shows up enough and it also blends in if I'm doing kind of skin tones or anything. But I always have this little stamping thing here so I can second generation stamp or ghost stamp, because I don't want a lot of ink. I don't want it to be really bold and heavy when I stamp it out. When I make the ideas, I can go as heavy as I want. But when I actually stamp it out to do it, see something like this with all of those lines, there's just lots of ink going on there. So I'm going to make sure I stamp most of the ink off onto this first, and then I'll just have the lightest impression. It's obviously really hard for you to see on a video, but that is something I suggest that you do as you're going along if you want to follow along with this stamping and illustration kind of tutorial. That's what I like to think of it as. I'm actually getting to, you know, illustrate, but I'm just stamping out all the pieces that I need to make it an interesting illustration and kind of enjoy a bit more of an abstract approach to my thought process with what I want to draw and how I want to draw it. It's also really great because you can stamp it out again real quick. You don't have to worry about if you don't like the way that it ends up. You know, you can stamp it out again. Like this one, for instance, I actually particularly don't enjoy how I finished this, but it was really easy just to stamp out another one and start again real quick. This is also a really great way to practice rendering styles and have a look at how many different rendering styles you can approach the same illustration with, to see whether your style maybe sits more in a, you know, loose and sketchy black and white ink place, or if you really like this children's book, like layer, lots of pencil and texture and rich colors, or if you're much more intuitive and loose and expressive with the brushstroke. This is a really fun exercise to see how different they all look. Personally, my favorite for today is this little watercolor illustration. So I'm going to take you through how to make this one here. Like I said, feel free to change it up and see what else you can make of it. I'm going to get this all out of the way. Actually, before we start that, because that one's going to kind of be, I'll chat you through the entire process. I want to show you how to stamp this out just in case you want to stamp this out and finish it the way you want to. Okay, I've got my large 6x8 flower here, so I'm going to stamp that just on a jaunty angle off to the right. There we go. I got a bit of blue on my stamps, so it's probably going to be a little purpley blue. You can grab something circular, or I stamped out the bottom of another stamp for this, but I'm not going to switch between sets today. You could just grab something circular, or just lightly pencil in a U shape or a big smile or an upside down rainbow, however you want to think of it. And I'm going to go from, like if this was our middle petal, I'm going to go from each side of that middle petal and just make a little face. Hopefully that doesn't scare you off if you don't like illustrating. Hopefully that's simple enough. Next thing I'm going to do is take my little teapot topper and I'm going to ink it up, but before I stamp it down, I'm actually going to wipe off the little circle at the top. And I'm going to stamp it so that it's positioned off to the right a little bit and that I just catch the bottom of that because I don't want that little circle. She doesn't have it, so I'm not going to do the little top of the teapot topper. I am going to grab the bigger one though. This is from the 6x8 set. Now if you don't have both sets but you do want to follow along with this, you could just stamp this out twice. I don't think I have a version here where I've done that. Or if you feel confident enough to draw it, you could just draw it. I'm not going to wipe off the top of that teapot topper this time, that little circle. I'm actually going to use that as my little waist. And again, I'm going to angle this even more down to the right and stamp it off. So she's got a nice little fun curve to her body. I've got the little 4x6 leaf shape. This leaf stamps out two ways. So if you stamp it this way, you can see that there's that tiny little, I like to think of it like the fatter point down this end. And then if you stamp it the other way, you've got the thinner point down that end. So it's not a symmetrical leaf on either side. So that way I'm going to add this to my top little teapot topper. And then I'm going to kind of flip it around. And I'm just going to stamp this one away. I don't want to connect it. Essentially when I paint it, I will end up connecting these here. And for the legs, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the little thin tapered end just off to the right down here. And I'm going to switch it to the short, fatter version and have those legs flying down to the right as well. So you can see most of our character is coming all the way down, following this curve. That's a nice bit of action and a dynamic pose for such a simple little character. If you are going to go and finish this your own way, you're more than welcome to leave it here. The eyes are simply two little ovals and they're just not fully colored in, so there's a little white dot in them. If you do color them in, you can just put a bit of white gel pen over the top just to put the catch light back. And the teeniest, tiniest little sausage mouth right smack bang in the middle of those two eyes. I like to put them right out in the corner so they look really cute. And I'll just give you this tip, when you are going to finish it, if you're leaving us here, just connect those leaves to the body, however they seem to connect. So this is where we've got our blueprint, but we don't have to take it as gospel. We can just find our way with those shapes now and make sure everything's connecting in a way that looks like an illustration. Or you can just re-outline that. For anyone that is going to stay with me and watercolor it, strap yourself in because it's about to get very loose and very splattery. So there you go. Hopefully you're going to have fun with that if that's what you needed from me today. Otherwise, I'm going to grab this little watercolor journal here, keep her off to the side. I'm going to restamp what I just stamped. This time I need to second generation stamp it. So as I ink up each stamp piece, I'm going to stamp it once on this manila tag, and then I'm going to stamp it again on my page. Make sure you keep your stamp flat on the block and try not to wiggle it too much because you'll start to lose some of that finer detail. It doesn't matter so much because you're going to draw over the top of it, but it's better just to leave it on there, press it firm and flat, let the ink soak into that substrate a little bit, and then just lift it straight up off your page. I'm going to pencil back in my little face. Sorry, I need to turn my book for this because my muscle memory likes to draw this curve this way. There we go. Again, I'm going to ink up my stamp. This time I've got the little teapot topper. I've stamped it off once. I'm going to wipe off that top and stamp that on. Can you see how lightly it's stamping out? I hope it's picking up for you. Now, I could have stamped it in the right position on this tag and had, two chances at it. It's fine. I really want it light because I don't want you to be able to see a lot of the working lines once I'm finished. I want to trick everyone into believing that I did it all myself with no help. I'm going to put one arm off to the side. I might detach this one a little bit and put the other arm the other way. Both legs, and we're done. I love it because she looks like she's dancing. There we go. Now, if you do need to connect some of these leaves, just put a line back to the body, following the center line of that leaf. If you need to, otherwise you can just go straight in with the paint, but I don't want people to feel stressed if that confuses you. So we've stamped out everything. Now we need to get to painting it. I've got some watercolors here. You only need a few. I'm going to get the lid as well because I want to mix some of the colors as I go. Okay, hopefully I'm set up all nice for you there. I'm going to grab a bit of this light yellow, water it down a touch, and I'm going to go over that face and just up in that area up the top. Now, I'm also going to use this as an opportunity to mix in some darker tones. So it doesn't have to be a darker yellow, it could be a brown even. I'm using this raw sienna. Whilst it's still wet, it's going to just blend in. And I might even bring some of that down into the top of the neck there. It doesn't matter if your watercolor just flows around. We're going to add multiple layers. This is our first layer, so we just want to block in some color at this point. I'm going to use some of this pink that's dried up on my palette, just reactivate that. And I'm going to trace the outline of the flower that I stamped out with my brush, and I'm not being precious about it. I don't mind if I go out of the lines a little bit or inside the lines, but I want to leave a little bit of white space there. Can you see how once this was finished, there's still some white gaps? That's super important for this really loose look. I'm going to pop some more of that yellow color, just a bit more rich. Whilst the page is damp, watercolor loves water. It's going to follow it wherever it goes. So as you're playing with your colors, you really want that page to be damp. So don't be afraid to add water to it. You don't need to put big puddles of everything everywhere, but do keep putting your brush back in that water. And if you can, mix your color onto the lid or onto the palette of your watercolor palette. That way you can kind of control how much you're using and how much of the pigment in the water you've got, rather than going straight in and not knowing. It's usually a lot more vibrant to go straight in from the pan. Sometimes it can be too dry. So again, I'm just going to trace around these contours of the flower, really loose. She's looking really vibrant. I actually don't mind that some of that pink dropped down into the face. I might just leave it like that for now. Let's get some of our green. I'm going to mix more of a turquoisey green this time. Now this is where I want it to be a little more of a liquid mixture. Lots more water than pigment here because I want to kind of wash over everything and fill in all of the little things that we stamped out. Remembering to leave some white space, but for this mostly we fill it in. And then I'm going to follow that leaf using my brush and the pressure of my hand pushing those bristles into the page to kind of fill it in one stroke. Just see what happens. It's a lot more of a natural effect. You can go over it again. We're going to put more color in it, but I like how this starts to leave that like perfectly stamped thing and go to more of a natural looking, painted version. Now, whilst all of this bluey green is still wet, I'm going to mix some different green into that first mixture, and now I'm going to start to add that to all of those places as well. I'm just going to dip it in. This is why I want it to be wet enough to be able to keep that page damp, because I want this color to flow through all of these other parts. Can you see how the watercolor spreads out? Wherever the page is damp, that watercolor is going to want to travel there. I'm even going to grab some yellow. Oh, I did want more of a teal. Maybe I should have grabbed a blue. It's okay. Yellow will still work. And this is our layer 1. So whilst we're here, I'm just going to put my brush into that water, get a really liquid mixture of that green. And now I'm just going to tap my brush. I'm going to hold my hand like this and then just tap on top around that green space. I really don't want it to go on the face too much. You could put a little protective little piece of cloth there or something, but it's the first layer, so it's not going to be crazy. I might grab some more of that, and sometimes I'll even dip it into the water and just like throw it at the page, just for some of those really random looking ones. I might even add some blue in there like I said I was going to do. Just get a bit more splatter. This is going to look like there's lots of energy to her pose. And before it fully dries up, I might even grab some paper towel and just blot out some of it as well. Then I can have different degrees of saturation with all that splatter. So some look like they're really faded and kind of blurred, and then others look a little bit more vibrant. Can you see here how some of them look a little bit more background and faded and blurred? That's just from blotting up some of it. So I've noticed that this flower part is a little dry, which is great because now I can start glazing over my second layer. I'm going to mix this purple that I've got on my palette. I might even mix it with a bit of that pink just to soften it a little bit. And now I'm just going to trace around that stamped area again. I can still kind of see my stamping lines, so I'm just going to use that as my guide to put this purple. This is going to add some more color, some more vibrancy, but also some shadow. So I don't want to fill the whole thing in with purple, just around the outside. And be generous with it too. There's nothing wrong with a high contrast shadow. I know a lot of people want to go in really soft with the shadows. I'm going to kind of stipple that around that circle at the bottom there, kind of creating that U shape. It can be tempting to just do shadows really, really slowly and methodically, and I don't think there's a need for it. If you're going to do a rendering style like this where it's really, really loose and watercolory, I say just go for it. In fact, let's put a bit of pink in our palette. I didn't do this on the original, but I want to give her a bit of pink splatter as well, so there we go. Maybe even a touch of yellow. I know I'm carried away now. I shouldn't have started splattering. It's going to be everywhere. Just love it. You really feel a lot less precious once you start throwing water at everything. I've got this lovely bit of terracotta looking color here, so I'm going to use that as a part of my shadow with some of this yellow, make a nice rich gold. And I'm just going to outline the face where it meets that flower, just a bit darker up there so that I can really make it look like that head is round. I might even put some of that in that top part as well. I don't know what that part is called, a stamen? No, I think that's the green thing. It's the middle bit. Okay, I'm going to let that dry because now everything's kind of wet. I was just kind of moving from dry part to wet part and then back again because I want some areas to be wet so that I can drop more colors in there, but I want other areas to be dry so that I can glaze over another layer. The trick to this looking like you've really put a bit of work into it is just having multiple layers. It's really lovely and impressive to be able to do some great watercolor techniques with just one brush stroke and one layer, but to really build up texture and vibrancy and texture, I'll say texture again because I think that's really important. To be able to build that up, you need to do multiple layers. So I'm going to let this dry for a little bit. I would typically heat tool it, but I don't want to give you any bad ideas. Heat tooling it sometimes will scorch some of the pigment or the binder. I'm not quite sure exactly what, and it dulls the color. So I'm going to let it air dry. That way I can keep it really, really rich and full of nice color. All right, I've waited as long as I possibly could. Now let's mix up some of this blue into this green. I really like this vibrant blue. I know it seems kind of weird to have blue leaves, but most of the body and everything is green, so it'll be fine. Now I'm going to choose one half of this leaf and just run my brush down there. I accidentally got too much of it then, but that's fine. Then I'm going to connect it to the body. You know what, I might add some of this blue in. And this one. I want it really dark and blue. I'm going to choose another half of this leaf and run through that. Now this is glazing. Watercolor is transparent, so you'll still be able to see kind of what's underneath it as long as you're using a transparent watercolor. Some pastel colors or like really vibrant neon colors have a lot of filler in them, so they're not really that transparent. But for the most part, if you water it down, it will shear out. And we want to be able to see underneath it, so try not to scrub. Even if you feel like you've made a little bit of a mistake, just try and lay that color on top to fix it. Try not to use your brush to really go in there and work over those lines over and over and over again, because you'll disturb all the watercolor underneath it. And you'll miss out on some of that texture and some of the stuff that you first worked on in that first layer. So I'm going to use this same color, this bluey greeny, put a bit of yellow in there. Now I'm going to just kind of outline those shapes again, the first ones that we stamped out, that little bell teapot shape. Just keep mixing the colors as you go. You want lots of different tones in there. So not just one shade of flat green. Even if you get to that point and you think, oh, you know what, maybe I could just add a bit of yellow in there and it might just make it a little bit more lively. Go ahead and just add some of that. You can even add some water and kind of blend a few colors or scrub a little bit away. I like a lot of watercolor texture in my pieces, so I don't mind going a little overboard. But I'm also going to add pencil afterwards, so I don't need to give it too much thought. I'm going to add some of that raw sienna color again. I believe it's raw sienna, I could be lying. It's just a soft light brown. Mix some warm red into it as well, just to revisit that face. I'm gonna get that pink and put a bit of red in there, I think. Like an orangey, reddy coral pink. And just concentrate that just a little bit closer to the top of that flower. So I don't have to outline everything. I'm just gonna put it up the top there. That might look nice. I didn't do that on the original one, but just felt like it. And then the last step before all of this dries is I'm gonna get this brown and just stipple in some of those little dots. The little seeds. Now I can go for round 2 of these splatters, but I've already got a lot on this. I'm going to be a little bit more reserved. I'm just going to throw some at it. Maybe one big bit of water over there. There you go. I love how I said I was going to be reserved and I just keep going at it. Okay, let's let that dry and we'll add our final pencil layer and a little bit of white highlights with a pen. I've got a few pencils here, just some dark blues and greens, and then also like a nice rich yellow gold ochre color. I've got coral and a purple. This is a really muted purple, but I think I'm going to go in with that first and just add back in some of those detail lines. Not everywhere, but where I feel like the shadows might be darkest. So close to this flower here, this top part. I might even add some of that shadow just to the yellow area. Maybe just where these petals overlap each other might be nice just to pick out some of that detail again. I just don't want to outline everything because that's going to be a little too heavy. That might be something you want to do, and in which case I would suggest not outlining it with black, but maybe just a darker version of one of the colors you've already used. I'm going to grab this gold ochre color and just add some of that to the face, in those shadow areas. Essentially I'm just adding extra pencil texture and color to the shadow areas of what we've been drawing. And just picking out any details I feel like got a little lost. You can see the difference between the two. This one's a lot lighter, there was a lot more water, and the layers were a lot lighter. I got really carried away with the vibrancy on this one, which is great. It just looks like the saturation's been turned up in high contrast. The last thing I think I'll do is add those vein details by running down the middle of those leaves, just adding a few lines that connect to that middle vein. It's a bit of a subtle detail, but you see it if you're looking for it. Might even darken up some of this waist area. And her little face, I think I'm going to put it on with this blue color. I'm just going to do my ovals full, and then I'll put the little white dot in with my Uniball Signo. Her little mouth. Oh, I want cheeks. I'm going to put little coral cheeks underneath her eyes. Might have to do red because there's a lot of color going on there already and I want them to pop a little bit. I think that's as best as they're going to pop for today. I've got a Uniball Signo white gel pen. I'm just going to add a few little dots to the top of this flower. Look nice and magical. I'm going to put it at the top of each of her eyes, just one little dot. So she looks like she's got a twinkle in her eye. I'm even going to put some of those dots that we did up the top, I'm going to put them in the center of her face, almost like freckles, but just an extra little bit of twinkle. And because a lot of her body is so dark, I didn't do it over here, but I think I might just add some little highlights just to the side of those shapes. So I'm not fully outlining them, I'm just kind of putting a little dash and a little dot as an outline. Completely optional, but I just think it'll help make that stand out a little bit. Might even grab that purple and just do the top of her face where it connects to the flower. Just fade that in to the side of her head. Sort of looks connected. And there you have it. She is all done. I think we managed to do a pretty accurate copy there. I think the differences are really noticeable. This one has a lot of lighter layers. You can even see the color palette swatched out next to this is so much lighter. And I used pretty much the same colors. I think the difference was I diluted them a lot more with water. This I allowed myself just to go in a little bit stronger and heavier, which is something I actually thought about after I did this one. I thought, well, if I didn't overwork this flower and I didn't have to put in so many layers for the shadows, maybe if I just went in stronger it would help. But now I know stronger looks like really vibrant high contrast. So I actually think there's virtue in having both. I hope you find success with this today. If you didn't use the stamps, I hope you found success with your drawing. I'm going to leave you there. That's been our concept stamping tutorial, The Baby Blossoms, the original inspiration by Ferdinand Horvath for Disney's abandoned short Ballet de Fleurs. I will see you again another time soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.